All right, welcome everybody to another episode of Tennis Channel Inside In on the Tennis Channel Podcast Network. Mitch Michals from the Santa Monica studios, about to start day 4 of the U.S. Open. It's been a whirlwind 2023 edition. Joining now on the show, first-time guest, excited to have her. You can see her on Twitter, growing the game, giving a lot of insightful and informative takes. She covers other sports as well, has a WNBA podcast that just started. Crina Mustafa, welcome to the show. Coming from us from the States, I know you're Canadian, but you are in America. It's a special occasion. Thank you for joining the show.
Yeah, my favorite thing is when you guys found out on the last pod that I was Canadian. But yes, I am in the States for the US Open, which is nice because I get to use my boyfriend's ESPN Plus feeds to watch all the tennis matches. So it worked out in my favor.
Yeah, I guess there's pros and cons, right? Nothing annoys me more in any sport when I try to find highlights on like Twitter and it says blocked in your region. I know, I don't know what it's
I
like
get
for
that a
yours.
lot. Yeah. Grand Slams, yeah. A lot of tournaments are pretty bad with the highlights. So I try to time my visits in the States around the Grand Slams just so I can get the best coverage.
It's smart. 4 times a year that we have to pay attention to. And this being a very interesting U.S. Open, we're going to do some initial reactions to some thoughts, some drama, a lot of upsets specifically on the men's side, which we haven't seen recently or in recent history, I should say. But there is the unfortunate of it. Unfortunately, it seems like there's a little bit of a bug going around the U.S. Open. We've had some pullouts. We've had some players either have to withdraw mid-match or just sluggishly, in Chris Eubanks' case, not able to play at his best form. This is an unfortunate thing. It's also something, Crina, that has happened in the past where you just have to battle through it and do your best. And I think that's where tennis being an individual sport might help you. It's not golf. It's not a team sport. You just have to get by one opponent that day and then try to rest and recover. Unfortunate, but we'll see who can make it.
Yeah, I mean, you see, like, even Ons Jabeur, she was battling through the flu, she said that she had, and she was still able to get through her match, luckily for her. But it's really difficult to watch when these players are clearly going through something. I mean, even Dominic Thiem, I know we all wanted to see him go against Ben Shelton, and to see him have to retire too. It really sucks, honestly, especially for a lot of players who are either on a comeback or they're trying to make it far after having some success, like you mentioned, Eubanks. But, the players that are still in, hopefully will try to take advantage of that and try to stay as healthy as they possibly can.
Yeah, and there's admirable things like team fighting that first set and, doing all he could. Eubanks especially having to take the bathroom break, was willing to concede a game, eventually pretty much did and, fought. And it was, there are opportunities there, but, you want to see the best players play their best tennis. Well, there's a lot to discuss. We'll start with kind of the straightforwardness of it. So far, so good for the top seeds, Djokovic, Alcaraz, Iga on the women's side, handling business. And we know one thing, Crina, about these Grand Slams is that you ramp up. You're not going to play, your A-level game in the early rounds, especially in Djokovic's case, who's done it 22 times in the past. I've really just been, delighted to see that the process is there, that he's getting what he needs out of it. Same with Alcaraz and Iga, these top players doing enough, not expending any more energy than they need to.
Yeah, and that's what you're going to see from top players like that. You're going to see them continue to get better with every round. And the fact that they can do that just tells you how good they are and why they are kind of separate from the field. Like, we like to joke about how if you want to beat Iga, you're going to have to do it before the final, because the level that she brings out in any final, whether it's a Grand Slam or any other tournament, it's very hard to play against. And so I think that's just kind of remarkable and speaks a lot to the talent that they have. But I think, honestly, it's all good for them. Even the others that we kind of talked about, like Jannik Sinner, Daniil Medvedev, they're still in it. Francis Tiafoe is looking good too. So, yeah, it's like, as much as there have been upsets, there's still a couple of like really dangerous players left.
Yeah, and we're going to get into all that. And Medvedev's a good one because he almost wanted to break Djokovic's record for how quick he can finish a match. Djokovic and Medvedev did it even quicker. And we've talked about this before. Serena Williams was an example of someone that got better as the tournament went on. And I always go back to Djokovic in the Australian Open. I think it was 4 or 5 years ago when Rafa was coming in with momentum. Joker was kind of just lurking through the field, like sleepwalking in a way. The final came and he raised his level and beat him in straight sets. So we know that there are levels to this. It's very, very fun to see the upsets, and there's a bunch of different ways to start. And I guess I could pose the question to you, men's or women's side, which upset to you was the most shocking that you didn't see coming?
I mean, as much as I...
A A
What's
lot to
that?
choose from.
I know, I know. As much as I kind of ragged on Tsitsipas last week a little, I gotta say, like, I was surprised that he went out so early. I think that's the upset. Dominic Figueroa, I mean, he played fantastic tennis, absolutely deserved to win that match. But man, Tsitsipas has like shown that, like, yeah, he hasn't really done that well at the U.S. Open. It's kind of just really hard with a player like that who started the year off really strong.
Mhm.
I really expected after he got through Raonic in straight sets, I really thought that he was going to be able to get through several of the rounds. But yeah, that I think was the upset that kind of surprised me the most.
I'm glad you brought up Tsitsipas. I have quite a bit to say on this match. First, the positive. Stricker played well. That fifth set, he served unbelievably well. Did not. But the fifth set isolated, he took that set from Tsitsipas. He played great. There's a lot going on in Stefanos' life, in his camp, in his tennis even too, because, and I say this as someone that is a fan of what he can bring to the court, the way he plays, when his forehand's going, when he gets to the net, but he's really, in his own head in a lot of ways. And I think we're starting to see that in terms of how he plays his tennis, the decision making, some of the errors he's making. He's got some technical things he could work on. His backhand slice isn't what it needs to be. And I know he hits that one hander, but with that beautiful stroke comes a lot of things you have to do to overcompensate. And Crina, I think he needs continuity in his tennis professional life. In the press conference, kind of got rid of Philip Pusis for the second time. Doesn't really know what to do with his camp. He's somebody that has gotten so close to a Grand Slam, 2 finals, but he seems as far away as ever at this current moment. I think there's no denying that.
Yeah, and I think I saw he was like responding to fans on like Reddit or something about his dad. I don't even remember what it was, but it was very, very odd for sure.
Mhm. US Open has been a house of horrors for him too. If you look at the stats year by year, he's gotten bounced early. Some of those matchups, obviously losing to Alcaraz before he became Alcaraz is one thing, but had the big match against Shorts the one year where he blew all those match points. This one a year ago goes out in the first round. So for whatever it is, and maybe it's the fatigue of how he ramps up or ramps down his tennis year, US Open hasn't been a place for him either.
Yeah, no. And so yeah, I don't know. I really did think that he was gonna go a little bit further, but yeah, it just seems like he just runs into a wall at this tournament every single year.
Well, I got to bring up, and we can get this part out of the way too. Tough look for Canadian tennis right now on the men's side because Felix.
You could argue women's too.
Yeah, well, Felix was the one that didn't surprise me, unfortunately, because
Yeah.
you look at the numbers, and last year he made the ATP finals, was one match, basically one set away from going to the semifinals of the ATP Tour Finals, year-end championships. But Crina, he ends up losing again in the first round. Mackie McDonald, quality player for sure, but sub 500 on the season. So that's why that match didn't surprise me, because unfortunately he's done a lot of losing this year.
Yeah, and I think I don't know what he needs to do. I'm not inside his camp or anything like that. I don't want to speculate, but maybe a break from tennis for a little bit might be a little bit beneficial. I mean, we even saw like Maria Sakkari too,
Mhm.
who's another upset, kind of just speak about what she's feeling right now and kind of what it feels like to lose a bunch of matches like these, and not feel right about it.
Yeah.
And sometimes like you need that break to just kind of reset and get back to the roots of what you're doing, get back to the roots of yourself, because tennis is a very hard sport. It's very grueling. You're on tour for the entire year,
Mhm.
basically. And every player handles that differently. So, as much as like Felix has all the tools to be a really great tennis player, and we've seen flashes of that, but with the knee injuries this year and just with his overall, I don't know if it's confidence or what it is, but getting into his head during matches, I think, maybe a little break might be good.
And tennis players are ultra competitive, and they're like sharks that smell blood in the water. So when you see a player struggling, you're like, "Oh, I want to play this player." I get Felix for, and it's true because like players would have had the different mindset last year or 2 years ago playing Felix. Like, well, this is a tough, ultra
Yeah.
skilled player. When you see someone struggling, it's like, give me that player. I think I can, kick them while they're down, and I understand why that is. Sakkari was tough to watch. With her, and I get like the break, and there's debates of whether you should take enough time off, what is enough, what's too much. But this is 8 straight majors, so essentially 2 years of not getting past the third round in a single major for a top 10 player, which is heartbreaking to see. But it's been pretty, unfortunately, consistent for whatever reason in these majors. She is getting tripped up early, time after time.
And I don't know. I really don't know what it is. I know she was followed by the Netflix crew for Breakpoint. I don't know if that adds another element to it. Like you just feel like there's a lot of attention and a lot of pressure because tennis players already place an incredible amount of pressure on themselves. And I think to have that kind of pressure from the outside too may be playing a factor into it because
Yeah,
you lose one tournament early and then the next one, and then if it keeps happening, you
right.
kind of start. That's where she was talking about like that self-doubt kind of starts to creep in a little bit. So I definitely feel for her, and I don't know what the answer is, but those are two players that it really sucks because like you know what their potential is and they
Yeah,
really could be so good. But before we like even move on, like just stick on the Canadian side, like
yeah.
let's talk about Layla Fernandez as well too, because God, I just want her to fix her ball toss on her serve. Like I think that's like my biggest thing with her where I've watched her so much this year, both in person, on TV, and I just when I see her bend that arm when she goes to toss the ball, it drives me crazy because
Mhm.
I know that's what's just like that's the biggest hurdle for her. Like all the other parts of her game will follow through if she's serving well. And if you look at the matches she's lost this year, she has not served very well.
Exactly right. And unfortunately, too, for her, like when you're a smaller player, you don't have as much margin for error for some of those,
Hmm.
like a ball toss. And it's incredible the tennis on the level she has. She's right there in a lot of these matches she's losing. We're talking like tight third sets that just, yeah, it's the small differences. As I heard David Ferrer say about the top players, like it really is a small difference as the margins are so thin. Just to get back to Sakkari, though, and I have a theory, and it's could be totally wrong, could be off. I don't want to get aggregated like some quotes in the past, but I do have a theory that with a player from a country that maybe hasn't had tennis success in a lot of ways, there's a lot of added pressure. And she kind of talked about it, saying the comment like, "I feel like I've let a lot of Greeks down." Kind of shows you how special Ange Jabeur is too for how she's been able to handle the pressure. But I think there's something to the fact that when you're a pioneer, when you're in a new charted territory, we know there are successful Americans and Aussies and now Canadians, and I just think there is added pressure that might get to you that, hey, I'm kind of carrying the flag and it's all on me as opposed to like these American men, we can kind of share it with each other.
Yeah, and because it really is just Zachary and Tsitsipas, and if Tsitsipas isn't
Ever.
performing either,
Like
like
like ever. Like these are the two greatest Greek tennis players of all time.
legit. And so it's really tough. And yeah, like we spoke about the pressure that tennis players place on themselves. You have the pressure they place on themselves, the pressure of representing their country, the pressure from the outside, from fans, media,
Yeah.
etc. So it's a lot. And on top of that, like you said before, it's an individual sport. So like I can't even imagine what that is like to just deal with.
Yeah, it's a tough one for sure. And not to get too negative, but the other men that lost that we should mention, Holger Rune, who had the thing with the court, wasn't really a
Oh
fan
yeah,
of his,
let's talk about his complaining.
so
As
there's a
he
level of, I think I wouldn't say immaturity, I'll say lack of maturity. It's part of growing up. I think all of us, myself included, when we were that age, might say some things in the moment. And again, I've never had a convo with him. You say something, you might regret it 5 seconds after. You might just speak from the hip, and that's good and bad. The thing for him more, I mean, I think that was kind of white noise, Karina. I think it was his level wasn't there. His health wasn't there. He hadn't won a match since Wimbledon. I
yeah.
think he would have been susceptible for an upset regardless of what court or who he played.
Absolutely. And like you even saw like Karolina Pliskova spoke about, playing on the courts too. Like she didn't mind that she was playing on court 14 to start because she said the center court is going to come when you start winning. So to complain about that in the first round or whatever, when also I think what bothered me about Rune posting that was one, he hadn't won a match this summer yet. So that was like the first thing. I was like, you may be number four. However, there's a bit of an asterisk that comes with that. Just this summer specifically. And two, like historically, like the WTA players have had more experience being placed on worse courts. Like you were on court five. Like you were so close to center court. Like it was like one of the more
Yeah,
important courts. Like Rybakina, after she won Wimbledon, like she was put in the parking lot at the next.
that was bad.
Yeah, like it was just like to me, it was like well, there's this history of like players that are women that are like historically getting treated worse when
Well,
it comes to like the courts, and you're complaining about court number five. That's one thing.
yeah. Hey, it's look, there's a lot to like about his game. He's super young. Get the health right, get the tennis right. It'll come. And I think he's
Yeah.
actually been able to, bounce back after lulls in his game pretty well. So we'll see with Holger. Casper Ruud was the other one. He lost last night to Zhang, and it was, Zhang's been playing well. Beat Wolf is, looked amazing in that match. He beat Taylor Fritzen on clay earlier this year. But for Casper Ruud, and I don't want to take away from his accomplishments like some might, but 3-time major finalist, got to number 2 in the world. The schedule this year hasn't been kind to him, and I think that kind of put him behind the 8 ball in a tough sport, and I just don't think he's found his footing and his rhythm, and as we know, tennis players can be creatures of habit. He never really hit the ground running in 2023, and I think we're starting to see it now.
Yeah, and I mean, the key word this whole time has been consistency, and he hasn't really been able to find that. He won a couple of small tournaments this year, but other than that, like on the bigger stages, we just haven't seen that kind of consistency from him. And I know we were all hoping for that Rune Ruud matchup, but which we didn't get because both of them just didn't make it there. But I don't know, it's really tough again. Like at this point, at the end of the season, if things haven't been going well for you, you're either gonna get it together and make a big run, or you're just going to face the same kind of results like you've been facing the entire year. So kind of the same with like Felix and Zachary, like just maybe take a hard break, hard reset,
Yeah.
just kind of see what you can work on in the off season too. Just what you need to develop, maybe look back at film of your matches over the course of the year, like figure out where things are going wrong, like where in matches does stuff happen where, okay, now you've just lost this entire match.
Well said indeed. More with Crina Mustafa here on Tennis Channel Inside In. There's a lot of good in this tournament. Don't want to get too down on certain things. These American men that are still going strong. I know Fritz hasn't been tested quite yet, but he's in a section where there's no seeds until a quarterfinal showdown now with Djokovic. You have Tommy Paul coming back from 2 sets to love down. That was huge. He's in the Rune section that has opened up. Tiafoe with Ruud also out. They could be meeting deep into this tournament. So those 3 guys trying to end that 20-year Andy Roddick drought for the last time there was a U.S. Open champ. I think more than anything, Crina, the Americans contingent, all 3 of them rising is good to see. And these are 3 lethal players going deep into this tournament.
Absolutely. And you're forgetting about John Isner too, who's also still in.
I can't forget him.
Can't
That was
forget.
a really cool moment, by the way. His family getting, coming out honoring him, and he's got a match as we record this today against Michael Mmoh. But yeah, it's good to see. He kind of passed the baton. It's kind of nice. Like I do remember, like Pete Sampras getting honored at the U.S. Open in 2003, and then Roddick winning it. It's kind of nice when one generation goes and the next just kind of keeps it.
Yeah. And yeah, on the other American front too, Tommy Paul coming back from 2 sets down for the first time in his career. It's huge. I think the tennis that he's been playing has been really, really solid and definitely deserves it. And I don't know if you saw that like moment with that little boy, the fan
Yeah,
who was like,
his new
"You
coach.
damn
Apparently.
near coaching me." Yeah.
I got to talk to Brad Stein again because he might be worried. I got a new coach in the podcast. No, but the big thing with Tommy Paul too. I mean, the tennis has been there. He's up to 11 in the live rankings, and last year he lost to Casper Ruud in a brutal match, brutal conditions. 5th set got away from him. His body broke down. That's not the case this year. So if anything, we kind of knew the mental strength was there, Crina, but body is, and the strength and conditioning, props to his whole team. He seems like fitness is not going to be an option whatsoever going forward. It's not going to be a hindrance, rather.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's going to be really huge, especially at this tournament where you have a bug going around and then also players who may not be able to handle those like best of 5 matches. So yeah, no, that's going to be cool. I also just like, I kind of mentioned Francis Tiafoe earlier, but I like, as I said last week, like I think he can make that run to the semis again. So I'm really liking the way that he's been playing. It's just really cool to see like American men being consistent
Yeah.
again. I think that's really cool. And to see it happen at the US Open too is always fun.
Is there anybody, I mean, outside of obviously Djokovic and like the big 3 and then, the all-time greats of the game, but there's not really anybody that just feels more comfortable than Tiafoe in this moment on the big stage. Like he just loves being out there, doesn't feel the pressure. I got to give him props because it's not easy to do. Like everyone's rooting for you. Everyone's there to see you. You make a couple mistakes, the energy turns negative, but he's just so comfortable under the bright light, especially in New York.
He loves it. And I think, every player has a different kind of attitude. That's just how he is. That's just how he is as a player, as a person. And I think that's greatly helped a lot of the success that he's had. The fact that he can feel relaxed in an environment like that, I think is a very big asset to have as a player, especially when you're playing at home. Because like we mentioned earlier, like the pressure of your representing your country can get to you, but it can also fuel you. And so you definitely see that with Francis Tiafoe. And he's just like, it's just like must watch tennis. Like he's just you you're so attracted to the sport through him, just the way that he plays. Like even like he's like I feel like in the same category as like Gael Monfils or like these
Yeah.
players like Carlos Alcaraz, like these players that just kind of draw you to the sport, no matter like if you're a casual or like a hardcore fan.
Yeah, he has that crossover appeal for sure. It's also why you see a lot of these celebrities and NBA players at his matches and rappers now too.
Shout out Jimmy Butler. I love
Jimmy
that man.
Jimmy Butler, Kevin Garnett, Pusha T. There's just everybody's there to see Tiafo. And, there's still name value. I think this US Open's been special because we have the mix of the young players coming up. We've got the veterans. Stan Wawrinka into the second round is one match away from a showdown with Sinner, which could be good. But Stan, at his age, 38 now, was the oldest man since Jimmy Connors 31 years ago to win a US Open main draw match. It's remarkable, but in a sense, it's kind of insane that Stan, of all these players, is the one that's going the distance longest. Like I don't think I would have predicted Stan being that guy, but credit to him getting in shape and still competing, having won this tournament before.
It makes me so happy. I am such a Stan the Man fan. I'm a stan of Stan,
Yeah,
whatever you want to call it.
Stan.
I've always loved him throughout his entire career. And I was like honestly worried that the age and the injuries were probably going to be the end of it. But to see him performing at this level this late into his career, it's been really cool to see. I
Mhm.
think like that's also kind of been a common theme with this tournament. Like you have a blast from the past where you have like Andy Murray and Dimitrov are going to face each other today. And that's also a
Grigor,
matchup that,
it's
yeah.
that's Grigor coming back from he's like the king of that. I mean, because the thing with Grigor and like we've put expectations on him, and unfortunately, it hasn't happened in the majors, getting a championship and all that stuff. But there's very few that I'm like, okay, 2 sets down, he's in shape, like he's going to be there. So 2 sets down, he's almost like the king of that. Like he'll come back, he'll be in there. Like this match isn't over, and we saw it yet again.
Yeah, and even on the women's side too, where you have Wozniacki and Kvitova facing off against each other like 14
Yeah,
years after their first match facing each other. And Wozniacki won that in her return
yeah.
from like 3.5 years like not playing at the US Open. Like it's so cool to see that. Like definitely for like tennis fans and media and people who just like would love to see like that nostalgia as much as it's so great that we have like this new influx of young stars. Like it's really cool to see some of these like older players still going at it.
For sure. And I want to get to the women in a second, but just to put a bow on the men's discussion here, you have Djokovic in a good position. No seeds until the quarterfinal with Fritz that we hope we see. You also have, Alcaraz, maybe Sinner in the quarterfinals, which would be a rematch of last year. And I think Medvedev lurking is another thing to look at because he's won here before. He's kind of going under the radar, which is crazy to say, but do you see that as kind of the storylines, or is there anything else we should be on the lookout for? You have Djokovic on his half, and Alcaraz Sinner showdown with Medvedev a factor. How do you see this kind of playing out?
You know, now that we talked about Stan a little bit, Wawrinka has beaten Sinner before. So if it gets to that, and if it gets to a point where like Wawrinka can last the best of five,
Mm-hmm.
that could be an upset. Like with all the upsets that have been coming, and I'm still confident in Sinner, but that could be something that might mess up that part of the draw.
Yeah, that I've always look. Last week I said, don't expect anything. Don't write anything down. There are upsets that happen. A couple years ago, everyone was like Rafa and Djokovic, U.S. Open final, and Stan Wawrinka said that's not happening. Djokovic got a little injured in that match, but Stan's not afraid to play anybody on center court.
Yeah.
That backhand's going. Be
Yeah.
careful. But yeah, Sinner's another one too. If he gets through, he can beat Alcaraz. He's done it before. There's a lot of uncertainty here, and that's all we really want, right? It's just unpredictability and just to appreciate these matches.
And that's why Medvedev would like to go as under the radar as much as possible,
Yeah.
because that's the way to do it. And there's someone else that's kind of under the radar on the women's side that we'll talk about in a second.
We'll get to for sure. And now going to the women's side, I wanted to mention players we didn't talk about. Coco Gauff is one, and I think she's handling expectations very well, considering that. And I don't want to take anything away from her, but Iga is a tough match in the quarterfinals, having just beaten her. But the fact that Coco, everyone is deservedly so on the train, there's a lot of pressure with that too. So we saw the first match was a little choppy. There was a lot of stuff going on. Her best level wasn't there, yet she bounces back, she gets through, beats Andreeva pretty comfortably. Coco's somebody that is so mature for her age, but the pressure will continue to ramp up until we get to maybe that showdown with Iga.
Yeah, and I think honestly, I think she's getting a lot better at handling it. I think she's having a little bit more fun too, especially I think playing doubles is helping her. That really funny moment with her and Pegula the other day where she
Forgot the
thought that
score.
she forgot the score. She's like, we were doing so well. I thought we just
Yeah.
won. Like that was so funny. I think that just also shows the amount of confidence she had. Like she was like, we were winning a lot of points. Like it's fine. And I think that's also translated over into singles. Like, I mean, I have her getting to the final. We'll
Ooh.
see. Yeah, I've had her since before the tournament. I've had her
No,
getting to
I
the
don't
final.
dislike the pick, and I wouldn't even say necessarily disagree with it. I just think looking at it from a sports scene, it's made me a little scary. It's giving me pause because Iga's this great champion, right?
Yeah,
Like
it's true, and
we're just all
I
like, oh, well, she beat her once, she'll just go. I'm like, okay, well, she could, but let's not discount. Iga's so smart that she will make adjustments too. So that's the only thing.
yeah, and I'm kind of joking about it, but I'm also kind of not. Where like I think Ostapenko could even take out Iga before
Oof.
that. We'll see, because like she has been a little bit rocky to start, but she's still in it.
Mhm.
But yeah, I don't. It's really hard, but I think the biggest thing with Coco is that she's learning how to figure herself out match
Yeah.
after match a little bit, and I think that's really important. I think an ability to adapt against your opponents within the match and to get better with every match is going to be important. Her forehand is looking a lot more comfortable, which is really cool. So I think it's these little things that are kind of just all adding up together that is making me a little bit more confident in her.
Well, Ostapenko, we'll see how she feels whenever she gets out of bed in the morning. That kind of dictates. Like you never know what to expect with her, but yeah, it can be very dangerous if her mind's on right, and she's ready to play. So Coco is one that they'll look at with Iga, of course. Jessie Pegula, we've talked about her doubles partner, and I do think you bring up a good point. The doubles side, and people criticize maybe you play too much tennis or it's a lot, but maybe it's more about that mental, just taking the pressure off, just being so rigid on the singles. I think it's helped both of them, Jessie as well, who has to deal, Crina, with the pressure of I've never really gotten past the quarterfinal. So
Yeah.
we're tabling it until that round.
Yeah, and I mean, even she even said it. It's so simple. Like, what does she need to do? Oh, she just needs to win a quarterfinal. That's it.
Yeah.
But I think, and I'd honestly push back on the argument that Coco playing and Pegula playing both singles and doubles is playing too much tennis, because honestly, I think it's just good training. Like as good as they, because they're so good in doubles. Doubles game matches are usually just much quicker because that last, if they go to a tiebreak, it's just 10 points. I think
Mhm.
you're playing, it's a lot faster because you have two people on your side of the court. So I think it's not, and not to say doubles isn't grueling. Doubles is extremely hard. Like especially if you sit in person and watch a doubles match, you're kind of just like, whoa, like
Yeah.
it's so much quicker and it's so much easier to make mistakes. But I think it's honestly helped both of them with their singles. And I would push back on people that say that they are playing too much tennis, because I also think that they know when they need to take a break, and they kind of showed that this summer too, pulling out when they need to. So I think it's been extremely beneficial overall. And Pegula also, like, getting past Georgie in that first round in straight sets was also pretty impressive for her, because that was not an easy first round.
No, another player dangerous that can always be trouble early on if you draw her. All right, so Crina, who is that player that
Mm-hmm.
you think is under the radar on the women's side? I think
It's
I might know who it is.
it's Belinda Bencic.
Yeah,
She
that's a good one.
yeah, she's been under the radar. That's kind of what she's been doing this summer. She's quietly getting past her opponents pretty easily. And lo and behold, she finds herself deep in tournaments. So I think she's somebody that nobody's really talking about, because everybody's talking about either Coco or Iga or Pegula or like all these other top seeds. But Bencic, she's been getting through the rounds quietly, and I think she's going to continue to do so until she runs into a bigger opponent.
I've been on the Belinda train quite a bit. She's still super young because she came out as a teenager, beat Serena in Canada, and all this stuff started to happen. If you look at the history of recent women's tennis and all these first slam winners, you say, wow, they kind of came out of nowhere. What are common things they have in mind? Belinda has been in the range for a while now. She's been in that 10 to 20 range. She's got some big wins. She's also had some disappointing early losses, but when she's in form, she can beat these top players. We saw her beat Naomi at this U.S. Open a couple years ago. So there's a lot to like about her game. I did think you might have said Kazatkina though, because I know you're on that train
Oh
and
yeah,
and
she's
her
still in
ability.
it. She's still in it.
Yeah,
I think
tricky
that
first round match with Alicia Parks, but she got through it. If she can get to Sabalenka, then we'll see what happens, because Sabalenka, is so dominant, but we'll give you those openings. There will be openings in a match where maybe you can just creak the door open a little bit and sneak in.
Yeah, and I think Kasatkina's matchup against Sophia Kenin today is also going to be an important one to get through. And hopefully she just continues to get better with every round too, because it'd be pretty nice to be right on something pretty wacky.
Can we also say that I think reports of Rybakina's demise were a little exaggerated, because everybody came in thinking, what's wrong? Everything's, and I was guilty of it a little bit too, because she had the shoulder issue that she talked about, but maybe it was the match in Canada was just gruelingly late, and that kind of threw off her circadian rhythm, because she looked pretty good against Kostyuk and had the fortune of not having to play round 2. So here we are with Rybakina into round 3, pretty fresh.
I would like to personally apologize to her as being one of those people that were kind of doubting just how good in form she was going to be. She looked awesome. She looked really good. I think, having that period of rest before the US Open, and now she's resting because she got that walkover, is going to be really good for her. So she's still very much in it. It might have been exaggerated, although still fair with the way that things went down. I still think it was fair, but it's really good to see how well she was hitting and how well she was playing.
I have to say, just because it was one of the funnier things I've heard a player say week and a half ago at the WTA event in Cleveland before the US Open, I had the chance to speak to some players, and one of them was Jasmine Paolini, the Italian, who's just hilarious. And she's like, when I was warming up with Rybakina, I kept thinking, oh my God, she's so tall.
That's funny. I walked past Rybakina in Montreal, and my thought was she's tall, but she's not as big as I thought she was.
I think it's the legs. And it's also, I bring that up, the strides are she's like a runner in a sense, where it's 2 steps, she's at the net. Doesn't look maybe the most, I wouldn't say graceful. It's a little unconventional, but I do think that her strides and her ability to cover the court without really looking like she's going fast is underrated. Everyone talks about the serve and the weapons, but yeah.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. But yeah, that's good job for bringing her up, because definitely needed to personally apologize for doubting what shape she was in.
A real live contender. I do want to, it's become like a reoccurring segment on this show now, and inadvertently, but the WTA Moms update, because there's more and more. There was double digits in the tournament this year, and some of them are really showing out. Have to say, friend of the show, friend of Tennis Channel, Taylor Townsend, incredible stuff. And it's wild, Crina. I've been following this sport for a long time, and I don't really know, I can't really explain how this, I guess, phenomenon, I'll say, is happening, where, players like Svitolina and, and now Taylor Townsend, they have children. They come back more focused with hyper intensity too, and look even better, I would argue, on the court than they did before they took their break. It's remarkable stuff. Townsend is playing like a woman possessed, and her form has just been incredible.
Yeah, and I mean, Townsend has been, I was going to make a joke that they need time away from their children, but I'm not going to do that.
Well, maybe.
But no, Townsend definitely, she got on my radar the year that she beat Simona Halep in the first round of the US Open. And I just remember thinking, oh my God, it must be super annoying to play against her with all the drop shots.
What a compliment, too.
Yeah.
That's just such a compliment. Yeah.
Yeah. So she makes things incredibly difficult. It's obviously been very successful in doubles too, and you can see where that comes from. And I think, as much as it was an upset against Haddad Maia did go to 3 sets with Sloane Stephens in the previous round. So I think, and lost to Leylah Fernandez this summer in Montreal. So I think Haddad Maia's, hasn't been at the form that she previously was when she was kind of the breakout player of the year. But it's still a very much an impressive win. And it's really cool to see. Again, we talked about the American consistency at this tournament too. Taylor Townsend is another name that has been doing really well. It is really cool to see.
Yeah, and very frustrating to play against. Her style gives her an advantage. Her net game, it's just great. The double skill, perfect. She made the final with Leylah French. She's got opportunities.
And she just won with Alicia Parks. She just won a title with Alicia Parks as well, too. Yeah. I forget where it was, but yeah.
She's exciting to watch. And of course, Wozniacki, who you mentioned before, but all that time off at tennis, kids, everything, and just beats the number 11 player. There's something with Wozniacki. I'm not going to say she's, because her peak was number 1. It's hard to be like, oh, you're at your peak again because you're the best player. But, if she comes back, she's going to be in shape. And that's the thing. You can never discredit her. You can never credit her enough, rather. Her fitness is top level. And she's going to get to every ball. She's going to come back in form. Her comeback to me is more of, she's going to be tough to play also because of the fact that her fitness is A+.
Absolutely. She's always been fit, really hard player to play against, and she's looked so good in her comeback, which also just gets me really excited for when Naomi Osaka eventually makes her return to tennis too, because I know she's working towards that as well. But yeah, it's just to see the motivation that these moms are playing with. It's really cool to see because they're really good tennis players, and the tennis world needs them, more of them, and to be playing really well. But yeah, she's always going to be tough. I'm really super impressed with her beating Kvitova. I think that was a huge win. Also, for it to happen in straight sets was cool too. She's a danger at this tournament, very much so.
Super dangerous indeed. Crina Mustafa, this has been great. Before we wrap this up, the women's side, anything else on the draw? I want to give a shout out as we're recording this live. Another under the radar girl on the tour, American Peyton Stearns, is up a break early, so she could be someone to watch as well. But anybody else here that you think could make a run, could make things interesting on the women's side?
Yeah, I mean, if Jabeur is feeling well, I think still keep an eye on her. She could make a run too. I think if she's feeling better, I would assume she is, like once you get over the worst day of the flu or whatever she had. The fact that she was able to get that was huge for her and might actually honestly help her for the rest of the tournament. So yeah, I think she's someone that I'm still keeping an eye on. Oh, and I can't believe I forgot to say this, but Jennifer Brady is having a very solid run. Like we've been sitting here talking about Americans, completely forgot to mention her.
No, that's a tough one on my part. But Jenny Brady coming back into the third round, another big win, beats Lynette, gets Wozniacki. So somebody is going to go on to someone's going to round 4. That's just going to be a great story. So all the work she put in to get back to this level, very, very fun to see. Also, I got to also throw out, never know what to expect from Madison Keys in a lot of ways, but if her A game is rolling, draw is not the most difficult, she's got a chance to cause some real noise here too. So
it is a tournament of the Americans at the US Open.
Yeah, it might be. Well, this has been fun. The only other thing I was going to bring up was that Manarino shot yesterday. It's going to be hard to tell.
Yeah, the shot of the tournament for sure.
Yeah, pretty good stuff there. Crina Mustafa, this has been a blast. Before I let you go, what's going on in your world? I know the WNBA podcast is going on. You've got some media endeavors. Where else can we catch you?
Yeah, so my WNBA podcast, Coast to Coast, we just released episode 2 yesterday. Go check that out at Her Hoop Stats. And you can follow me on Twitter or X or whatever you want to call that website at Crina MM. I post all my work there. Should have a very big tennis story coming out soon in the next week or so surrounding something in tennis. So yeah, keep an eye out for that.
Oh, is that a teaser?
It is a teaser.
Okay. All right. Won't press you for any more then. Follow her on Twitter. Check out her podcast, her tennis takes. Crina Mustafa, thanks for coming on Tennis Channel Inside. And for the first and not last time, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks, Mitch.